That sound, that wasn't just the sound of construction, that wasn't renovation. That was the sound of a heartbreaking. That was the sound of a brotherhood dying. That was the sound of the most powerful friendship in American history being smashed into dust, one swing at a time. It is a scorching weekend in Palm Springs, 1962. The man holding the sledgehammer is not a construction worker. He's the most famous entertainer on planet Earth. He is the chairman of the board. He is Frank Sinatra. His hands are bleeding. Blisters have burst on his palms. But he doesn't stop. He is swinging that heavy iron hammer with a rage that could burn down the entire Coachella Valley. He is destroying a helicopter pad. But this wasn't just any slab of concrete. This pad was built for the President of the United States. It was built for a man Frank called brother. It was built with Frank's own money, designed to the exact specifications of the Secret Service, ready to welcome John F. Kennedy to the home of the man who helped put him in the White House. Inside the master bedroom, there is a gold-plated telephone, not a prop, a secure line, installed at massive expense, wired directly to Washington, D.C. It sits there, shining, mocking him, because that phone never rang, and that helicopter, Marine One, it never landed. For decades, the mainstream media spun you a fairy tale. They told you Sinatra was a sore loser. They told you he was a mob-connected thug who became a bitter old Republican because he lost his cool. They painted the Kennedys as American royalty, pure, untouched, the heroes of Camelot. They lied to you, plain and simple. What happened that weekend in Palm Springs wasn't a temper tantrum. It was the moment Frank Sinatra woke up. It was the moment he realized that in the dirty game of politics, loyalty is a liability, and friendship is just a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. Today, we are opening the vindication files. We are going to wipe away the polish, ignore the PR spin, and look at the cold, hard facts. We are going to show you why Frank Sinatra was right to smash that concrete, and why, in the end, he was the only honorable man in the room. Welcome to the Rumor Report. To understand the rage, you have to understand the love. And make no mistake, Frank Sinatra loved John F. Kennedy. But you have to go back to who Frank was. He was a kid from Hoboken, an Italian-American in a time when that meant you were a second-class citizen. He scraped, he fought, and he sang his way to the top of the world. But he never forgot the code of the streets. Loyalty above everything. You dance with the one who brought you. In the late 50s, Frank saw something in JFK. He didn't just see a politician, he saw a reflection. Kennedy was Irish Catholic, another outsider group. He was young, he was handsome, he was cool. Frank thought, this is it. This is our guy. We're going to take over the country. Let's go to the testimony of Joe Moretti, a fictional composite of his close aides, who drove Frank during the campaign of 1960. He remembers the energy in the car. I'd never seen the boss like that. He wasn't sleeping. He'd come off a movie set, eyes red, and start making calls for Jack. He'd say to me, Joe, we're going to change the world. They're finally going to let us in the front door. He reworked his hit song High Hopes just for the campaign. He wasn't just a supporter, he was a disciple. Frank Sinatra became the kingmaker. He organized the donor dinners. He brought the Hollywood glitz that Jack Kennedy desperately needed to look modern. He introduced JFK to the most beautiful women in the world, including Marilyn Monroe. Frank made Jack Kennedy look like a movie star, but there was a darker side to this alliance, a side the history books like to gloss over, but we won't. The election of 1960 was razor thin. It came down to a few thousand votes in places like West Virginia and Illinois, places where the unions controlled the ballot boxes. And who controlled the unions? The outfit, the mob. The rumor, backed by FBI files released decades later, is that Joe Kennedy, the patriarch, the old bootlegger father, came to Frank. He knew Frank had friends in Chicago, friends like Sam Giancana. The request was simple: call your friends. Make sure the unions vote the right way. Frank didn't hesitate. Why? Not for money, not for power, but because his friend asked him to. He put his career on the line. He put his neck on the line with dangerous men. He brokered the deal. And it worked. Kennedy won. Illinois swung blue. On Inauguration Night, Frank Sinatra stood there, organizing the gala, looking at the new president, thinking he had earned his seat at the table. He thought he was part of the family. He didn't realize he was just the help. If you're tired of how cheap loyalty feels today and miss that old school code guys like Sinatra lived by, hit like and subscribe. It shows that real values still matter. Thanks for the support. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a slow poison. And the man holding the vial was Robert F. Kennedy, Bobby. Bobby Kennedy was the Attorney General, and he was on a crusade. He hated organized crime with a religious fervor. And to him, Frank Sinatra was a walking neon sign for everything he despised. He saw the glitz, the gambling, the late nights, the friends from Chicago. Bobby started whispering in his brother's ear, "Jack, you can't be seen with him. He's radioactive. He's going to ruin your image." Imagine the hypocrisy. The Kennedys used Frank's radioactive connections to steal the election, but now that they were in power, they wanted to scrub their hands clean. They wanted the votes, but they didn't want the guy who got them. Frank ignored the signs. He was blinded by loyalty. He thought, Jack is my pal. Jack understands. Bobby is just the annoying little brother. Then came the news that should have been the crowning achievement of Frank's life. 1962. The president was coming to the West Coast, and the word came down. Jack wants to stay at your place in Palm Springs, Frank. This was it. The president of the United States sleeping under the roof of an Italian kid from New Jersey. It was the ultimate validation. Frank went into overdrive. He didn't just clean the house, he rebuilt it. He built cottages for the Secret Service. He installed a communications hub that rivaled the Pentagon. And the helicopter pad. He spent thousands of dollars pouring concrete, reinforcing the ground, making sure it was perfect for the president's heavy chopper. He wanted Jack to land right in the backyard, to step out like a king. Frank was giddy. He was choosing the wines personally. He was checking the thread count on the sheets. He was telling everyone in the Rat Pack, the president is coming to my house. Meanwhile, in Washington, the knife was being sharpened. Bobby Kennedy slapped a dossier on the president's desk. It was the FBI file on Sinatra. It detailed his dinners with mob bosses, the same mob bosses the Kennedys had used 2 years prior. You cannot stay at his house, Jack. It's a security risk. It's a PR nightmare. If the press finds out you're sleeping in the same bed where Sam Giancana might have slept, we are finished. John F. Kennedy, the man Frank idolized, looked at the file, he looked at the polls, and he made a choice. He didn't call Frank. He didn't explain. He didn't have the decency to talk to the man who helped make him president. He handed the dirty work to a lackey. It is 48 hours before the visit. The champagne is on ice. The staff is ready. Frank is beaming. The phone rings. It's Peter Lawford, the British actor, member of the Rat Pack, and, crucially, Kennedy's brother-in-law. Lawford was the go-between, the messenger boy. The conversation was short, but it was the deadliest conversation in Hollywood history. Lawford's voice was shaking. He knew what he was about to do. He knew he was about to unleash a hurricane. Frank, there's been a change of plans, Lawford stammered. The Secret Service, they think your place, the access routes, it's not secure enough. The president can't stay there. Frank went quiet. The air left the room. Okay, Frank said, his voice dropping an octave. I get it. Security. Where are they putting him? The hotel? And then Lawford delivered the kill shot, the insult that was so calculated, so personal, it had to be intentional. No, Frank, he's going to stay at Bing Crosby's place. Bing Crosby, Frank's old rival, the Square, the man who represented the old guard. But worse than that, Bing Crosby was a Republican. He hadn't lifted a finger for Kennedy. He hadn't raised a dime. He probably voted for Nixon. Let that sink in. Kennedy was ditching his most loyal soldier, the man who bled for him, to stay at the home of a Republican rival simply because it looked better. Frank hung up the phone. He didn't scream. Not yet. He walked out the back door. He walked past the pool, past the pristine guest cottages. He walked to the helicopter pad. The concrete was still curing. It was perfect. He grabbed a sledgehammer from the tool shed, and he started swinging. He destroyed it. He smashed the concrete until his suit was ruined and his hands were raw. He wasn't just breaking a floor, he was breaking his faith in the system. He was breaking the illusion that liberals and Democrats were the good guys who cared about people like him. He realized they were users, elitists, people who looked down on him from their Hyannisport estates. To them, Frank was just a court jester, entertaining, useful, but never an equal. That night, Peter Lawford was banned from Frank's life, excommunicated. Frank never spoke to him again. Lawford died years later, still begging for forgiveness, but Frank knew, if you deliver the message of betrayal, you are part of the betrayal. The media crucified Frank. When he started drifting away from the Democrats, they called him a turncoat. When he supported Ronald Reagan in 1980, the press laughed. Look at old Blue Eyes, they said. He's gone senile, he's forgotten his roots. Frank had a simple answer. I didn't leave my party left me. And history, our great judge, has vindicated Frank Sinatra. Look at the facts we know now. The Kennedy hypocrisy. While Bobby Kennedy was hunting mobsters, his father and brother were using them to fix elections. Frank was the fall guy for their dirty deeds. The moral high ground. The media painted JFK as a saint, and Frank as a sinner. But we know about JFK's lifestyle now. The affairs, the recklessness. Frank was honest about who he was. Kennedy hid behind a mask. The Reagan connection. Why did Frank love Reagan? Because Reagan, an old Hollywood guy, treated Frank with respect. When Reagan became president, he invited Frank to the White House. He didn't hide him. He didn't feel ashamed of him. He gave Frank the Medal of Freedom. Frank wasn't chasing power. He was chasing dignity. He realized that the working man's party had been hijacked by elites who despised the actual working man. Does that sound familiar? Does that ring a bell in today's world? Frank saw it coming 40 years ago. He realized that true loyalty isn't about political slogans. It's about how you treat the guy who had your back when you were down. Kennedy failed that test. Sinatra never did. When Frank Sinatra died in 1998, the world mourned. The lights in Las Vegas were dimmed, but the most telling detail of his life wasn't in the headlines. It was in his coffin. Alongside a bottle of Jack Daniels and a pack of Camel cigarettes, his daughter tucked 10 dimes into his pocket, 10 cents. Why? Because in 1963, shortly after the Kennedy betrayal, Frank's son, Frank Jr., was kidnapped. Frank spent hours on payphones, negotiating with kidnappers, terrified that the line would cut out. He ran out of change at one point. He never forgot that panic. For the rest of his life, he always carried a roll of dimes, just in case. This was the man Frank was, a man who lived with trauma, with passion, with real fear, and real love. He wasn't a politician's prop. He was a father, a friend, a fighter. He wasn't perfect. He had a temper. He held grudges. But he was real. In a world of fake smiles, teleprompter apologies, and backroom stabbings, Frank Sinatra stands tall as a symbol of something we have lost: integrity. So, the next time someone tells you Frank Sinatra changed or sold out, you tell them the story of the sledgehammer. You tell them that he didn't sell out. He bought his freedom back. He smashed the symbol of his servitude and walked away with his head high. What would you have done? If you built a landing pad for your best friend and he spit in your face to please the polls, would you have smashed it or would you have swallowed your pride? I think I know the answer, because the people watching this channel, you guys, remember when a handshake meant something. If you believe Frank was right, if you believe loyalty still matters, do me a favor. Smash that like button just like Frank smashed that concrete. It sends a message that we haven't forgotten the truth. And hit subscribe to the Rumor Report. We don't just tell stories here, we set the record straight. I'll see you in the next file. Keep your eyes open.